Played out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Welcome to Your Boys Took One Hell of a Beating. Trying not to do that in a really, really poor Norwegian accent. We are.
Come on. I think you need to try it.
Okay, let's try it. Your boys took one hell of a beating. Sounds a bit more. I don't know. God knows where that is. But yes, this is Module 1. We will call this of our new 1980s podcast venture. Joining myself tonight, we have Aidan Williams. Aidan, welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
We're doing the traditional curtain raiser. It's the Charity Shield. A Charity Shield from the 1980s.
What could be bigger?
Absolutely. The first showpiece of the season. This is the great, big, huge kind of like, I don't know, how many sides are on a Charity Shield, Aidan?
Is this the quiz question that should have been asked in the...
This is the quiz question that
in the trial thing. I don't know.
I'm trying to visit.
Too many.
Is it 8 sides to it?
Oh, I think it's even more.
What I can remember doing is Subbuteo, whereas kind of like we had like the FA Cup trophies and all that, where they were like 3 times the size of the players, which would be great to see in life-size form, to see kind of like FA Cup winning captains lift a trophy that is 3 times the size of themselves. Like
I can confirm it does have 8 sides.
8 sides. Oh, look at that.
Correct. You see, you obviously got to be in these games much more than I ever was, so that's how you know.
Absolutely. We were used to seeing it arrive at Anfield. But what we were doing, kind of like play Subbuteo versions of kind of like the Charity Shield. We'd have a 50p piece at the side of the pitch ready to kind of like award the winning seat. So not the same shape, but as close as you're going to get. It's silvery. It's kind of like the Charity Shield. So yeah, we played a few Charity Shield games out on the Subbuteo pitch.
Danger of the trophy crushing the players there, isn't it?
Absolutely. If that topples over, my God, someone's out for at least 6 months. There's some glue is definitely needed to fix those Subbuteo players. Aidan, you've opted for 1986, Liverpool versus Everton. What was the reasoning behind this? Just because I opened up the whole decade to you. And you were quick to come back with 86. What made you lean towards 86?
Well, it's obviously my natural inclination towards Merseyside football. I think actually it is because of the two teams. I think it seemed to sum up the decade in many ways. The two most successful teams of the decade facing each other. They also did in 84, but even beyond that, of the 10 Charity Shields in the decade, only one of them didn't feature either one or both of Liverpool and Everton. And I think that was 81, was it? Says he reaching for his notes.
Yes.
Villa Spurs in 81, that's right. So apart from that, Liverpool and or Everton were in every other single one. So obviously when they faced each other, that to me sums up what Charity Shields of the 80s are all about. I do remember the 84 one in particular. I vividly recall it going to extra time and I was supposed to be off to some function or event or family thing or whatever and trying to see the end of it, wanting to know who won. And then, of course, nobody won. They had to play again at Main Road. But this one, I kind of remember, I want to say only bits, not massively, probably because maybe I was on holiday. Maybe it wasn't just a huge thing. I don't know. But I think this was the two teams at their best. They were both superb. Obviously, they'd fought each other for the league, for the FA Cup the previous season, and would continue to do so over the coming season for the league. So it just kind of sat at the perfect moment, I think, and sums up what Charity Shields of the 1980s are all about. It's a load of Liverpudlians going down to Wembley.
Absolutely. And we did it so many times as well that you're getting your 84 League Cup final and your 84 Charity Shields all mixed up there, Aidan. That was the one there.
Right,
it was the League Cup that went to the Main Road replay.
That's right.
The 84 Charity Shield. Everton win it via, and this is even more kind of like ridiculous. They win it via a Bruce Grobbelaar own goal. That's the 84 Charity Shield. No,
you're right. Sorry, my mistake.
No. It's, I was going to say this was such a regular
Happened too
occurrence.
often. Yeah,
It's so easy to get them mixed up. But between March 1984 and May 1985, Liverpool and Everton did go head to head with each other at Wembley on 5 occasions: 2 FA Cup finals, 2 Charity Shields, the aforementioned League Cup final. You throw in the League Cup final replay, which was at Main Road, a series of big clashes in the league with the title at stake. The 86 Charity Shield thus falls massively under the radar as far as these games are concerned. Yet, it is a big marker in terms of it being the very first time that the Charity Shield is shown live in the UK. All previous showings of it have been, recorded highlights, later in the day or even the day after. ITV, do the coverage of this one. This is also kind of like a bit of a watermark as such. It was virtually a sold out Wembley, 2 years earlier for the 84 version, the Groblar version. The 86 version, still 88,000 there, mid-August. This is kind of like just 7 weeks beyond the World Cup final, 3 months beyond the FA Cup final. Even Liverpool and Everton fans, there's 12,000 who are still on holiday. But that's
well, let's be honest though, there will be more Liverpool and Everton fans at this Charity Shield with 88,000 than there would have been at the FA Cup final 3 months earlier because of all the sponsors,
absolutely
all of that. So there won't have been as many Scousers on that day, even though it was a bigger crowd.
This is very true. But yeah, it does fall beneath the radar. But within that, you can look at the attendances beyond the 86 Charity Shield, and they start to drop. Year on year, there's a hell of a drop the following year when, no, not the following year, 2 years later. There's still a drop a year later when Everton play Coventry. You look at the Liverpool-Wimbledon game and a lot of sparse open spaces at Wembley for that one. And all the way up to, I think, the closure of the old Wembley. You do have the reduction in capacities and all that type of stuff. But this is kind of like a bit of a zenith for the Charity Shield. But the 80s in general with the Charity Shield, it's definitely its heyday, isn't it?
Totally. It felt like a bigger thing. And maybe this was in part, when we look back with, I guess, for the second half of the decade, with the absence of European football, maybe, that we viewed it as a bigger deal because it was two of the, it should be anyway, but you've listed somewhere it isn't necessarily two of the bigger clubs going face to face. I think because there was less football on TV than came through the 90s and then obviously into more recent times, we hadn't had the chance, or we weren't anticipating overload of TV football going forwards once the league got underway. We knew there'd be bits and pieces, but there wouldn't be loads and loads. Whereas now, Charity Shield, something or Community Shield, to give it its current name that I just cannot get my head around. It's been 20 years now, I think.
It's always got to be the Charity Shield.
It is, but just looking at it, it has been 20 years or even more. I think it was 2001, apparently, it was the last Charity Shield. God, totally passed me by. Anyway, it's now just an afterthought because we're only a few days away from saturation of television, endless coverage and so on, and it's all about the league. Back then, not to say that the league wasn't important, it was, but I think we weren't expecting to get 5 league games over on television over the weekend straight after, whereas in this case, this was a standalone event. It was a big event. Never having had a skin in the game, I don't know how seriously people took it. What I particularly loved about this occasion was the fact that it ends up being shared, and I think that's such a sort of unique, touchy-feely type of way to end a football competition. It's all a bit weird. The Americans would hate it, let's be honest. They wouldn't stand for none of that nonsense, but it seemed to fit with what it was. As the name suggests, it was a charity raising event. It was just a nice way to raise the curtain of the season, because it was, especially in this case, as you said, it was sort of peak Charity Shield. It was undoubtedly the 2 best teams of not just that year, but the whole mid-80s. And it was a good game as well, and it just set you up for the season. And if you're right in then saying this was the first live one, well, that just adds to it then. Maybe that's why subliminally, this one came to mind more than others as well, because, like I say, we weren't going to have lots of other football on telly. So this was the perfect curtain raiser in the way that it just can never be anymore.
I mean, I'd add to that as well. I mean, the Community Shield this season, I hate to call it that just as much as you do, Aidan. That game, and it has for quite a long time now, and we're probably going back to the mid-90s. It coincides with the same weekend that the Football League starts their season. The Football League starts in the week before the Premier League. Whereas at this year in 1986, we're still about a decade away from that being the case. So this would be, certainly in terms of English football, a standalone game on that weekend prior to the opening weekend of the season. So it was literally the only show in town as far as English football was concerned on that weekend. The game played out August 16th. And that makes a difference because, you're looking at the way we embrace the summer and the build up to the new season as well. We aren't talking at this point in time about endless games being shown, endless friendlies being shown on TV or being streamed. All the preseason analysis goes on, which is just like so exhausting. I know from a Liverpool supporting perspective, in the Merseyside Northwest area, what we had was we'd be looking at our pre-season via the back pages of the Liverpool Echo. So we would see the Echo would send out the reporter, whether it was Ken Rodgers, whether it was Ian Hargreaves, Rick George, whoever it was that was selected to go and follow Liverpool on tour, usually in Ireland and Scandinavia. You would normally get a small column of information on the game, whoever scored, whoever played, if a substitution was made, that type of thing. Very little to go on. You'd get the lineup at the bottom and you'd see who played. And that was your lot. You'd obviously get little bits of news here and there about transfers, but it was all very much drip fed. It was a little bit here and a little bit there. And what it did is it kind of like rose the anticipation levels of the new season to come. And then there you have this Charity Shield, and then it was definitively your first viewing of English football for the season. So this is where you had this sense of, there was a sense of occasion to it in that respect, because it was your first glimpse of English football that season. Yeah, like you say, throughout the 1980s, there was a Merseyside element to 9 of the 10. But yeah, the games were absolutely kind of like, from through the eyes of a child, taken hugely seriously, and I think the players as well. We're looking at this 1986 game, and we'll get into the divergences of the match, but I'd throw in a little bit. Kevin Ratcliffe's performance in this game is quite antagonistic in a way where it clearly matters to him, to the extent that his decision making is a bit questionable, and it's his junior partner in central defence that is actually the grown up for Everton in the back line that day.
There's got to be a lot to that in terms of what happened at the end of the previous season, of course.
Absolutely.
Everton could have won the double.
So to carry, you can see there's a kind of, shall we say, a frustration being taken out by Kevin Ratcliffe, and exceptionally early in that game. And we'll come to that in a little bit. I mean, what we'll look at first, or what next anyway, is the concept that, how the teams were involved, and you've intimated there about the double that Liverpool did. How did it come to Liverpool and Everton being involved in this game?
This could have been league and cup winners in the blue corner, with Liverpool as the runners-up in both, quite easily. But of course, it was the other way around. And Everton, I don't know, the pain of missing out on both fronts. This is an Everton the previous season obviously had adjusted things slightly and had Gary Lineker up front for a year, and he'd scored hatfuls of goals. Andy Gray had to make way, part of that. He'd scored a hatful of goals individually, but like we've seen with various teams over the years, that doesn't necessarily mean the team succeeds better for all of that individual's goals. You could look at Harry Kane in Bayern Munich for a recent example for the young kids. It doesn't always translate to team success, although it nearly did. I don't know whether the adjustment to Lineker's style or his approach reduced what the rest of the team were able to do, or the fact that they had to ensure they played in a way to give him the service rather than the way they'd done with Sharp and Gray in the preceding years. And it was a bit more, I don't know whether it was a more collective achievement in terms of the number of goals. Possibly that took something away from them slightly. But they still came very, very close to winning several trophies. The FA Cup final is one that really sticks in the mind massively. So it's the first all-Merseyside FA Cup final. Everton took the lead, I think, if I'm right in saying, through Lineker, only for Liverpool to win it in the end, especially with Ian Rush smashing a camera at the back of the net for the third goal. I never fully know whether he or Craig Johnston got 2 in this and who got the 1, because there was one highly debatable between the 2.
By rights, that is Craig Johnston's goal.
Okay.
By rights, he definitely gets to it before it gets over the finish, over the goal line. But yeah, it's always been Ian Rush's. But yeah, if for the pedants, for the those with OCD, I'm sure it's and don't get me wrong, I've probably got a degree of both in those. But yeah, it's kind of like, that's definitely Craig Johnston's 2 goals rather than Ian
Well,
Rush's.
it definitely looked that way. But yes, I'm quite sure that it always went down as Johnston 1, Rush 2. But hey ho. But the league was very, very close as well. There was only 2 points between the 2 teams in the end, with West Ham oddly only 2 points further back. Now that seems odd that they were so close to both of these teams. You kind of almost feel that they were a little bit further away from everybody, but no, that's not the case. Normally, the Charity Shield would have been between the league winners and the cup winners. Obviously, that doesn't apply this time, but we get around any sort of, we get around most arguments about it. I know you're going to flag Oxford as being someone who might feel slightly hard done by, but since Everton were runners-up in both, it's pretty clear who it would be. I do recall my one and only Charity Shield involvement in my life, I suppose, because I don't think... No, yeah, that will be the only one and only. Newcastle's involvement was when they were runners-up to double-winning Manchester United. As league runners-up, they played in the Charity Shield, whereas the FA Cup runners-up didn't. You got none of that nonsense this time around. It was nice and easy to know. However, you did flag that Oxford United fans would say as the League Cup winners, maybe they should have been in it.
There were, yeah, I mean, this wasn't kind of like a huge campaign across the board for it, but there were some dissenting voices from the terraces.
Did they have a media baron that they could focus their campaign through?
Yeah, I think they might have just done so. Yeah, there might have been I don't know. Should we say someone? Yeah, not particularly seafaring in the end, but certainly very forceful in the boardroom. And
I mean, the club sank like a stone eventually. As well.
Excellent work, Aidan, and we'll back away from that one. But yeah, I think our work here is done, Aidan. That is absolutely outstanding. But yeah, Oxford. I was reading online as well not so long ago. Actually, not so long ago, only last week when we floated this concept.
Oh dear!
Oh my word! I didn't even kind of like plan that one, Aidan. Someone had suggested that there'd even been mention of Barcelona being kind of like brought in as opponents to Liverpool for this Charity Shield match, but I don't remember that at all. I do vaguely remember the Oxford voices saying, "Hang on, that should be us." But yeah, it had to be Everton. You're right. The precedent was that it was the league runners up basically. The only previous time the double had been done was Arsenal 70-71, but this is pre-Wembley. This is a point in time in 71 where the Charity Shield is very much an afterthought. It's in a precarious position. Arsenal aren't bothered; they don't want to take part in it. And in the end, that 1971 Charity Shield takes place between Liverpool, who are the FA Cup runners up, and Leicester City, who are the Division 2 champions. A proper weird concoction of teams. It's only from 74 onwards, when the game switches to Wembley, that suddenly actually the clubs are starting to sit up and take notice and saying, we want to be involved in this event. All of that aside, and all seafaring mentions done with, at least for now until we come up with something else. Everton go into this game without 7 first-team regulars. Neville Southall is still nursing his way back from that horrendous injury he picked up during the run into 85-86 when on duty for Wales against Ireland. Gary Stevens misses out on this one. He's injured as well. He's a late withdrawal. Pat van den Hauw is missing. There is no Neil Poynton, no Derek Manfield, Paul Bracewell, Peter Reid. All of them unavailable. As mentioned, Gary Lineker has left for Barcelona. So this means debuts for an intriguingly recruited Paul Power, which, a lot of people at the time were kind of like looking askance at, inclusive of Everton fans. And Kevin Langley, also who'd signed from Wigan Athletic, the midfielder. Neil Adams will make his bow from the bench briefly. And Kevin Richardson comes in from the periphery, a decent player, but he'd certainly fallen away from the reckoning of Kendall's side during the unrequited chase for the double. He is soon sold to Watford. But Everton's so light on players that, they have to name 2 goalkeepers on the bench for this one, Mike Stowell being one. The other is the future rubber mask wearing Fred Barber. Bobby Mims wasn't fully fit. He'd picked up an elbow injury, and there was a serious consideration for Barber playing the game. Never eventually makes an appearance from the Everton first team. But Mims is quite central to this game, Aidan.
He was excellent.
He'd come in during this running of 85-86 for Everton. A lot of Everton fans, inclusive of a certain Paul McParlin that we know, who has written the book on Everton's 1986-87 campaign, The Forgotten Champions. I nearly forgot the title of it as well. Who was it that season? Oh, yeah, it was Everton.
Who knows?
Someone should write a book about that. Oh, they have. It's Paul. But Bobby Mims had come in and actually kept a raft of clean sheets. He didn't concede 1 goal in any more than, on one 90-minute occasion until the FA Cup final in 1986. And Southall himself, has been at pains to say that, he couldn't have done any better than Mims did during that run.
I remember that run when Mims was in. It never struck me, and this was obviously as a child, 11-year-old or whatever at the time. So, not the greatest analyst of footballing talent, but he struck me as not looking out of place at all in a top-level team. I mean, maybe that's partly confirmation bias because he was in a very good team, I guess, but he didn't look ridiculously out of place. And yeah, it's the comments from Southall sort of back up what my childhood memory of Bobby Mims were, as did watching the highlights of this game again. He was very, very good in this game. He made a number of crucial saves. Yeah, a good keeper, the kind of keeper who could easily have been a first choice at many other clubs, I would say.
Well, I mean, as it would unfold, a different podcast, but, he did go and sign for Tottenham. Tottenham swooped on him as their post-Ray Clements new first-choice goalkeeper eventually. So, yeah, a goalkeeper of plenty of talent. Reminded me quite a lot of Chris Woods, looking back. Chris Woods came through at Nottingham Forest, had Peter Shilton in front of him. There's a similar situation for Mims with Southall at Everton. But Woods went on to have a very good career, elsewhere via QPR, Norwich, Rangers, Sheffield Wednesday, England international in his own right. And Mims kind of like had that, enough talent to believe that he would go on to do good things elsewhere because, of course, he was never Neville Southall, but, he was a goalkeeper that certainly I felt was capable of walking into, the first team of, many first division clubs. And he did initially at Tottenham, but unluckily enough, fell by the wayside. For Eric Torsfed, went to Blackburn, fell by the wayside for Tim Flowers. So there was always this case of him being kind of like gazumped by, a goalkeeper of perceived better repute. But, in this game, certainly, he was outstanding with a series of fine saves, as you say. One particular one from Steve McMahon, virtually at point blank range. Within that, intriguing that, Trevor Steven gets called out as being the man of the match in this one. I think for me, kind of like, there are at least 3 Everton players that exceed him that day. One being Mims, one being Adrian Heath, who will get the Everton goal in the game. The other being Marshall at the back. There's a certain, intrigue in this. He's a Liverpool lad. He will go on to bigger things elsewhere, or more notable things in the Premier League era at Oldham Athletic, at Ipswich Town, at Leicester City. Ian Marshall, started out as a central defender, and then would kind of drift up front where he would be a regular source of goals over the years. Something that was mimicked in the way that Paul Warhurst would come through. But yeah, Ian Marshall in this one, we mentioned it earlier on, Kevin Ratcliffe. He weighs into an unnecessarily stern challenge, way away from his own penalty area, kind of around about the halfway line, goes right through the back of Ian Rush within 4 minutes of the start of this game.
And they ought to be mates, surely.
Yeah, these two were mates at international level, and the two of them would, offer lifts to each other. Go in after the Merseyside derby games. Do you want to lift home? And the two of them would give each other a lift home, whatever the result. So this was kind of like an intriguing flashpoint, but he goes right through the back of Ian Rush. Rush himself reacts, but having been clattered from behind, I think he's utterly surprised to see it's Kevin Ratcliffe who's gone straight through. And Jan Molby, who is massively piqued about this incident, comes absolutely charging in at top speed and goes and just knocks him over basically with the broadness of his chest.
Yeah, you wouldn't mess with Molby.
and Ratcliffe goes spinning away. It's a very kind of a degree of frustration that Kevin Ratcliffe starts this game, and a bit of Ian Marshall in there. He does play very well in this game, and like I said earlier, it's like he's the grown up in this game when it should really be the other way around.
Well, especially when there's so few of the regulars playing, that those that are, you'd think are needed to be really focused on the task at hand. Because you look down the list of the players involved: Paul Power, Kevin Langley, and then later on we'd have Neil Adams and Paul Wilkinson. These aren't exactly stellar names of Everton's mid-'80s heyday, are they? And yet they played very well overall as a team. You think you'd be extra reliant on your key characters in such circumstances when you go through the list like you did of those who are missing. It's there's some major character, Peter Reid in particular in the midfield would probably have been the one clattering into Rush instead, perhaps. Maybe that's why Ratcliffe felt he had to do it. I don't know. Maybe he was just having a go at Rush for not being a Liverpool player technically anymore.
Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit of Ian Rush in a minute, but let's run through that Everton side. Bobby Mims in goal, Alan Harper at right back, Paul Power at left back, Kevin Ratcliffe alongside Ian Marshall in central defence, Kevin Langley in central midfield with Kevin Richardson, Trevor Stephen down the right, it's Kevin Sheedy down the left, Graham Sharp and Adrian Heath up front. And on the bench, it's, as mentioned, it's Mike Stowell, Fred Barber, Paul Wilkinson, Neil Adams and a certain Warren Aspinall, who my brother knew as a teenager and was an interesting character around the local pubs. Getting his move from Wigan Athletic to Everton. Eventually went on to play for Aston Villa and very prolifically, or reasonably prolifically, for Portsmouth. That Everton side, when we come to look at it, there's still plenty of talent and experience in there. But you've got Alan Harper, such a key component for Everton over those years. But, he was unlucky to not even be on the bench for the 1986 FA Cup final. Paul Power, an excellent sign and such a potent player for them all season. Came in, looked a strange signing at the time, but, proved to be, I think, one of Everton's, if not the most pivotal player for them in 86, 87, one of them by all means. And yeah, it's that midfield that stands out. And in a way, you look at that lineup and yeah, there's still some star elements, Kevin Richardson, who, like Alan Harper, was on the outside looking in on the 86 FA Cup final. It's Heath's comeback, marginalised by the goals of Gary Lineker. The previous season, he picked up that injury, which had kept him out for a bit. But, and he was looking at kind of like moving on as 85, 86 rumbled along kind of without him, with him just being on the periphery. Yeah, Lineker goes, Kendall persuades him to sign a new 4-year contract. And, this for Adrian Heath is kind of like, I don't know, it's his rebirth as an Everton player.
He's someone who, in your mind's eye, anyway, my mind's eye, when you look at him in an Everton shirt, it is one from the earlier era with the big white part on the top of the chest. That's what I picture Adrian Heath in, which I guess goes to show that's when he was much more of a regular. At least that's how it seems to me. He was, though, an excellent player, but one who, I guess, because of how good Everton were, because of the good players that they'd had. So obviously there was the Sharp and Gray time, then there was the Sharp and Lineker time, and then finally now, because they'd sold Lineker to Barcelona for how much was that? Let me see, £2.75 million. But the money from that hadn't really been invested in anyone of any great standing. You know, they were spreading it around a little more. They were trying to sign Dave Watson for the defence, which would have used up roughly, I don't know, a third of that money. So it wasn't that they were going to splurge it all on anyone else. Therefore, Heath got his chances again. He's someone who I also recall from his time at Burnley later on, partly and not entirely because some of my housemates at uni were from Burnley, and therefore it was all about Inchi Heath and how well he was doing for them. But he's one of those players who was never the very best, and therefore that's why he sort of got shunted down the pecking order. And yet he was still very much good enough to play a key role for a big team. If you think in more recent times, somebody like, I say recent times, God, I'm going back 25 years, somebody like Solskjaer, who, you know, was often the substitute coming on and making vital contributions, but possibly never deemed good enough to be the main man. Heath probably had a fair chunk of that in this era, and yet provided all sorts of crucial moments. But I think the majority of those came a little earlier, and therefore he was less critical to Everton by this point. But Lineker's departure, I guess, gave him the opportunity to shine.
Absolutely. And as Paul, author of the book that we all remember,
what's it called again?
The Forgotten Champions, Everton's 1986-87 season. He's always said that Heath, you know, such a more natural partner for Graham Sharp within that. You know, no matter how great Lineker was, and his scoring in 85-86 was monumental. But yeah, you know, the goals kind of funneled through Lineker that season rather than kind of like spread across the team. This would kind of be a return to certainly the Everton pattern of 84-85, not the team. It's a very, very different team to the 84-85 vintage, but, you know, Heath's reintroduction to it basically is a big element. Going back to Dave Watson, though, yes, Dave Watson is being very much chased by Howard Kendall at this point. Derek Mountfield, magnificent player, yet Kendall's clearly looking for a new central defender to play alongside his captain. With Watson, you know, Everton have made a £750,000 bid. Robert Chase, that Norwich chairman, who you know, he could, you know, he knew a fast buck when he saw one, was wanting £1 million for the former Liverpool player. They would eventually settle to an agreement of £900,000, but this would be a week beyond the Charity Shield. So the presence of Dave Watson loomed over this, which in a way it kind of made Ian Marshall's performance rather than a thankless one, just one where he had a free hit at this game. And
yet probably knew this was his one big opportunity to shine on a big stage because someone else is going to come and take his job.
Absolutely, he had nothing to lose, kind of nothing to gain. But he was absolutely excellent in this game. You know, his time of the challenges, his positioning. You know, going back to Ratcliffe, you know, that early antagonism in the game rumbled on for him, and he would eventually be booked. He would be booked. You know, this is the thing as well for this 1986 Charity Shield. This is before the yellow and red cards. The yellow and red cards take a bit of a hiatus for a few seasons in the 1980s. And it goes back to the old system of where referees would literally get their pen out and just write the name of the player in his notebook. Hence, he's been booked. And a sending off would just simply constitute him pointing his finger towards the dressing rooms, basically. So Ratcliffe is booked, not given a yellow card, but he's booked for another poor challenge on Craig Johnston. Which kind of, you know, it's after that one he kind of settles down a little bit, but yeah.
He should have been sent off by modern standards, he settles down.
then he settles down a bit. He's been booked rather than flashed a yellow card. But yeah, Ian Marshall in this game is definitely one of Everton's better players. But yeah, Mims, Marshall, and Heath in particular. But another player in that Everton side, Kevin Langley, a figure that falls totally off the radar. He has a peculiar season in that he ends up, he signs from Wigan. There's a trumpeting of his signing. He looks in the early exchanges of his Everton career, a fine signing for them. And despite the injuries to Paul Bracewell, despite injuries to Peter Reid, Kendall's confident enough in Langley to kind of like agree to sell, a fine player in Kevin Ratcliffe. In Kevin Richardson to Watford. He'd have a year at Watford before moving on to Arsenal. So getting back into where he would go on to win the league title with them as well. Kevin Langley's a peculiarity in this because he wouldn't last the season at Everton. He played enough to win a league title with his medal, but he would soon be farmed off. I think initially on loan to Manchester City before the permanent transfer.
Well, Howard Kendall made some inspired signings in his time at Everton, but Kevin Langley is definitely not one of them. And the decision to ship out Kevin Richardson, who obviously, as you say, went on to great success with Arsenal, a key part of a part of their team, maybe not key, but he was still able to contribute at a high level. Whereas Kevin Langley, not so much. I think that I could pretend to know a lot about him and his career, but I honestly, until looking at this, reading about this game and watching it, I had no idea that he existed at all. I couldn't remember. His name meant nothing to me. And yet he has a key part to play in this game, or should have had a key part to play in this game as it went towards the end. I guess it's one of those things. I mean, every club has instances of signings of great promise that just don't come off for whatever reason. And this was very much the case for poor Kevin Langley, I think.
I mean, look at his stats there. He plays 16 league games for Everton in 86-87. He scores a couple of goals, but I think it's his all-round game that just doesn't quite, fit the bill eventually. And Kendall soon changes his mind on him. But, he does play, when we'll come to his pivotal role a bit later on, but we'll turn our attentions to the Liverpool team for this game. Yeah, this is Liverpool. The only players they're missing in this game is Steve Nicol, who would miss 2/3 of this season. This is the most injury-disrupted season in a Liverpool shirt. Very consistent in the amount of games that he played and his availability across the entire span of his Liverpool career, apart from 86-87. So no Steve Nicol. Paul Walsh is injured as well, so he's not available. There is one debutant in Barry Venison.
Get in, Barry.
Barry Venison. I'll run through the team and then we'll touch on Barry Venison and his route to Anfield and the intriguing manner in which he did it. Bruce Grobbelaar in goal. He will not complete the game, and an injury sustained in this game will see him miss around about the first month of the season. Barry Venison at right back, Jim Beglin at left back. Mark Lawrenson gets the nod in central defence alongside Alan Hansen ahead of Gary Gillespie. You have Steve McMahon in central midfield with Jan Molby. Kevin McDonald is asked to play on the left-hand side of midfield, which is an unusual position for him, which means Ronnie Whelan's switch to the right-hand side of midfield. It's Ian Rush up front, who is paired with Craig Johnston initially. On the bench, we've mentioned Kenny Dalglish appearing. Mike Hooper, will come to Mike Hooper in a bit, but he is the man that comes off the bench to replace Grobbelaar for the last 33 minutes. Gary Gillespie, John Walk, Samuel Lee are the unused substitutes. Very strong Liverpool lineup there, Aidan.
Well, it's in massive contrast to the Everton one, isn't it? I know they're missing one or two, but not in such a way that would hugely impact them compared to what's happened to Everton's lineup. Absolutely. This is very strong. A lot of the players at their peak as well. This isn't big names at the wrong time. This is big names at the right time. Barry Venison's an odd one because he sticks out in my mind as one whose name doesn't quite meet what I'm saying there. And I always felt this about him. God love him. Even when he ended up in black and white, he was a character and decent, but Hey, fair play to him. He's obviously had what it took to be part of this Liverpool team, even though I couldn't see it.
He'd been Sunderland's captain in the 1985 League Cup final
As a very young man as well.
21 or 20 or 21, something like that. So clearly Sunderland saw something in him. I mean, everyone was clearly hypnotised by his hair. That was an absolute stonewall. But yeah, by the summer of '86, I'll throw a little bit of Sunderland in later on when we're doing our and finally section. But yeah,
throw them off the boat with the Oxford chairman.
You can throw them overside, Aidan. I'll allow you this, and you'll enjoy that. And finally, but later on, I'm sure. But yeah, it's summer of '86. They've been relegated in '85. Spent a season in the second division under Laurie McMenemy. All of that tumultuousness that would go on at Roker Park at that point in time. '86, he's kind of thought, no, I need to be back in the first division. He literally takes pen to paper and he writes to every first division club, posting along with it a video of his best bits. Videos of his performances in a Sunderland shirt. And the only response he actually gets is from Liverpool. And Dalglish kind of I think for whatever reason, Dalglish says, come on then, we'll take you on then. And this is kind of to be fair, there was a bit of a vacancy for a backup right back at this point in time. Phil Neal has left Liverpool to become player manager of Bolton Wanderers, December of '85. So there is no, natural, cover at right back. And given that Steve Nicol does, struggle for injury, through injury issues this season, it was kind of Liverpool were in need of right back at the time. But and so for Barry Venison, he times his kind of his VHS. We're presuming VHS rather than Betamax, because no one would have had a Betamax at Anfield knocking around to watch this video.
How many other better players must be thinking, if only I'd thought of that, I could have been in this Liverpool team.
Absolutely, but this was just a great kind of, quirk of the era. I mean, I wouldn't say quirk of the era. It wasn't like this was a type of story that was heard, multiple times over. This was a very kind of fair play to the fella.
It is simply astonishing. I hadn't known the full details of that, and I absolutely love it. It makes me like the guy all the more. I believe I've told my Barry Venison anecdotes before of when I served him in Newcastle Airport and his choice of reading material. So we'll not sully his image by going into that here. But he was a good player. To have been made a captain of, a struggling top flight team at that point, but he took them to a League Cup final, Milk Cup possibly it was at that time. At that age, though, that is, that says a lot about him as a character, strength of will, and certain qualities about him and how he plays. And possibly that helped contribute to what Liverpool wanted. Liverpool at this time wouldn't have wanted any disruptive influence. They wouldn't have wanted anybody who would negatively impact things at all. They'd only want those with the right type of character to fit into what was obviously at this point an all-conquering team. It wouldn't quite work out that way in the coming season. Somebody else won. I can't remember who won the league. Forgotten them again. But, this is coming into the double winners. They're not going to just take anyone. So equally, as much as other players might be wondering, why didn't I think of that? Some of the other clubs who he'd written to would then see him playing for Liverpool and wonder, well, maybe we should have taken a chance and offered him, the starting role more permanently, which he wouldn't always get at Liverpool, of course. But hey, fair play to the guy.
Absolutely. Another point of interest in the Liverpool side, Samuel Lee, unused substitute. Within about a week, maybe 2 weeks, he'd be a QPR player. So, parallels to Howard Kendall's offloading of Kevin Richardson there. Sammy Lee's time at Liverpool will soon be over too. In terms of the game itself, Liverpool, given the strengths of the two sides, who Liverpool have available, who Everton don't have available, Liverpool dominate the early exchanges of not just the first half, but the second half as well. But in both halves, Everton, come into contention from around about the 20-minute mark, it's almost kind of like, there's a degree of, from an Everton perspective, it's like we've weathered that early storm and actually let's have a go now. Adrian Heath, is excellent for them, and for Liverpool, there's kind of like the first half is very much a kind of like cat and mouse. There is opportunities at both end. Craig Johnson does have an opportunity cleared off the line. There's kind of like, it's an intriguing game rather than a classic game at this point in time. Interestingly, on ITV's coverage in the commentary box, you've got Brian Moore and David Pleat, and in the studio you've got Ian St. John and Jimmy Greaves happily, and you've got in the first half summing up, David Pleat is very withering about the game, and that there's just it's not the quality's not good enough, and they're not taking chances, not doing enough in the final third. And Brian Moore, you can hear Brian Moore in his voice thinking, well, I didn't think it was quite that bad, but I feel like I should kind of like be in agreement with my summariser here rather than going against him. And then it's back to the studio where kind of like Jimmy Greaves is kind of like, I totally disagree with Brian there. I think that's been kind of like a really intriguing kind of game there. The strength of Liverpool, the weaknesses of Everton, but Everton coming on strong after Liverpool have kind of like, started brightly. A couple of near misses and all that type of stuff. So it sets it up for an interesting second half. Into the second half again, there is that kind of degree of similarity. Liverpool again, fast out the blocks, but Everton, bit by bit, come into a big alteration on the game. Shall we say? It is the introduction of Kenny Dalglish. Dalglish brings himself into the fray for the last half hour. Not long after Liverpool have lost Bruce Grobbelaar. Now Grobbelaar picks up this stomach strain. I think he overstretches for a cross. I think he actually takes the cross. There are a few crosses he misses in this game. He does make some excellent saves as well. Just as Bobby Mims does at the other end. But in classic Grobbelaar form, it's a sliding scale, shall we say, in his performance. But he does injure himself in the first half, and again, this is part of the era in which this game's taking place. It's clearly been taken seriously because there is no immediate withdrawal of Grobbelaar. Not even at half time. He's kind of like he's assessed and he's patted on the back and off you go out for the second half, Bruce. Absolute insanity, really, when you come to think about it. He would miss the first 7 league games of the season on the back of this injury. A couple of League Cup games, first leg of the Screen Sports Super Cup final against Everton again. That much derided position 1 year.
It doesn't get bigger than that.
We will do an episode on the Screen Sports Super Cup. That without shadow of a doubt. Someone will have to reluctantly put their hand up for that one. The injury to Bruce Grobbelaar, that's just insane, isn't it? Mike Hooper comes on in the 57th minute to replace him. Now, Bruce Grobbelaar signed for Liverpool, March 81 from Vancouver Whitecaps. Liverpool managed to get a work permit for him where West Bromwich Albion failed a year or two earlier. He comes into the side at the beginning of the 81-82 season. Ray Clements is sold on the eve of the 1981 Charity Shield to Tottenham Hotspur. Grobbelaar becomes Liverpool's first choice goalkeeper, and rather than it's not an era in which kind of like players drop out for League Cup games and all that type of stuff. They literally play every single game. If your first 11 plays every single game, and between August 1981 and August 1986, Grobbelaar doesn't miss a single game. Liverpool signed Bob Boulder in the summer of 1983, who's just made the semi-finals of the FA Cup with Sheffield Wednesday, second division team. He opts to leave Sheffield Wednesday to join Liverpool to be understudy to Bruce Grobbelaar, and doesn't play a single game for the club. Sits on the bench for the European Cup final in '84. He's injured and misses the 1985 European Cup final. Probably thankfully for him in that respect for what goes on that night. He departs Liverpool partway through 85-86 for Sunderland, and then Mike Hooper's signed for relative peanuts from Wrexham to sit on the not even sit on the bench to sit in the stands. The Charity Shield, you name 5 substitutes. That was the only the rare exception, the only exception in English football where that was allowed at this point in time. He's sat on the bench that day, surely not expecting to be called upon. Bob Boulder's got to be watching on television thinking, Christ, why couldn't that have happened during my kind of like 3 years at the club? And here's Mike Hooper thrust into the thrust centrally into the the national spotlight as well. We're looking at a game live on.
Well, on one hand, we were denied a brilliant moment though of having an outfield player having to go and goal because of what you're saying of having 5 subs and a goalie on the bench in this era. That's ridiculous. We should have had Barry Venison in goal with his flowing locks. That's what this game really needed. But hey, yeah, Bob Boulder must be kicking himself for finally having enough and missing out on actually getting to play. But I don't think Mike Hooper covered himself in too much glory in this. I don't know what he was like for the first few games of the league campaign, but he's another one, obviously, I'm a little more familiar with because he spent some time with Newcastle United as well. I don't think I ever found him particularly convincing. And this was at a time where the likes of Pavel Srnicek wasn't particularly at his most convincing either, and yet you'd rather have had him in goal than Mike Hooper.
Yeah, very, very much a goalkeeper. He was a good shot stopper. But yeah, we're not looking at a Bobby Mims here. I think he probably could have played first division football, but it wouldn't have been for a top half.
He makes Grobbelaar look like a safe pair of hands.
Absolutely, there was a kind of I don't know, a thankfulness that Grobbelaar eventually came back in. But within that, Venison does kind of like have. So I mean, he has a few. Kind of like he throws in a few mistakes here and there, but he puts he plays very well on other occasions. There's again this bizarre sliding scale of the calamitous to the spectacular, but he's less of a prospect of him coming for the crosses that he shouldn't come for, that Grobbelaar would sometimes venture out for. But yeah, again, this is like. I don't know, this is like the backing dancers being thrust central. You've got Bobby Mims and Mike Hooper. It's like Jason Orange and what was it? Is it Mark? What was his name? What was the other one? Howard. Who's the other one in Take That? Who's kind of like the one dancing with the hat at the back and and all that.
Help you there.
I want to call him Mark Howard, but I don't think he's called Mark Howard because what's confused me there is that I've got a friend called Mark Howard. And I would always call him Mark Howard from Take That because I said Mark Howard. Wasn't that the fellow who's in Take That?
I'm sure there's a Mark and a Howard.
There is.
I don't know either of their surnames.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm trading on street cred there, not knowing the full lineup and Take That, even the mega lineup. But yeah, this is kind of like the very much one for the backing dancers when it comes to the goalkeepers. But yeah, Hooper plays a big negative part in the goal that eventually puts Everton in front. He leaves a big wide open space for
It's not even just that. I think that's being generous to him. I think he dives out of the way.
He kind of gravitates towards his left-hand post. Heath enters the Liverpool penalty area from the right-hand side from his perspective. And then he kind of offers this big kind of like billowing net to the right of the right of him. And then when he hits the ball, even though he's relatively close to the left-hand post already, he dives to his left. It's such a peculiar way to concede a goal.
It's absolutely bizarre. This is your big moment. You're at Wembley. You're playing for Liverpool. It's televised. You've finally got a chance to oust the big man. And what do? You leave a big gap and dive the wrong way. But I wouldn't put the entire blame for this goal from Liverpool's perspective just on him.
Oh, no, absolutely.
That was ludicrous. The defenders, I don't know what they were doing. Hansen and Lawrenson seemed to just dither and think that Graham Sharp, I don't know, he must have hypnotised them in some way. Graham Sharp's presence seemed to freak the pair of them out. They didn't know what to do, and Heath just nicks the ball and races through. It's bizarre.
Yeah, there's this long ball forward from Alan Harper, and the ball kind of like drops, but even Sharp's part in this, he doesn't control the ball or nod it on. It kind of hits him. It bounces off him and just falls perfectly into kind of like the path of the on-running, aforementioned Adrian Heath, who kind of like with one touch has taken it past Lawrenson, the bewildered Hansen, into the wide open penalty area. And it's
and then Hooper just says, "Here's the goal."
Hooper's there, and like there's a big huge part of my net to aim at. Within that, it's properly against the run of play at this point. Dalglish's introduction kind of like changes the complex, of the complexion of the game. He adds this bit of this total sense.
Yeah, they've been good a degree of, anyway, but they've
been good, but suddenly it's very different. They're seeing all the angles. There's very much a kind of like the esoteric starts to kick in. Johnston switches to the left, to the right. Whelan switches to the left. It's Kevin McDonald that's withdrawn, and suddenly there's a lot more balance. There's a lot more fluidity. This is a Liverpool team looking a lot more comfortable in possession of the ball and capable of doing something very, very dangerous. And the expectancy is that Liverpool will go on, score a goal and win it. But no, 10 minutes to go. There's Adrian Heath with this very peculiar goal, which kind of like lights the match up.
It's an early season goal, isn't it? It's as though they just haven't got used to playing together again yet. Maybe they hadn't had enough pre-season. They're all a bit worn out from all the pre-season training. They're not quite ready, match fit. They're not match ready, and they're sitting there like, "Oh, after you take it." Oh.
Absolutely. There is a degree of forgetting the basics of the game for several people involved in this goal on both sides of the Merseyside divide as well. I will put that forward as. But yes, this is like such a kind of like Liverpool are incensed as the goal goes in. It's kind of like, hang on a minute, we're completely in control of this now. How the hell are we losing this to this team with Kevin Langley in it? You've brought on Neil Adams from the bench, starting from Stoke City. I think this is another one that will end up at Wigan. Going back to Kevin Langley, he would return to Wigan Athletic eventually, and I watched him. I remember going and watching Wigan quite a bit at Springfield Park, 1990-91 it would have been. Not long left high school, and me and a few mates from high school, what we were doing that season was that certainly from my perspective, was that if Liverpool weren't playing, if we were switched to a Sunday, which was happening on a regular basis, Saturday we'd be kind of like venture out for the game of football, and we would often head to Springfield Park, usually at my insistence, because David Fairclough had signed for Wigan, and I wanted to see David Fairclough play in a Wigan shirt, and every time he went, he was injured.
You're going to say he wasn't on the bench, was he?
He wasn't even on the bench. He wasn't available. Every time I missed a Wigan game that season, he'd play. Every time I went to one, he was unavailable. He wasn't there. There was some massive kind of like David Fairclough related conspiracy going on. But Kevin Langley was in that side. Division 3 as was. And they did play some good football that season from the games I watched. But yeah, Kevin Langley, I remember looking at him and thinking, how did you play for Everton? How did... it wasn't that he was a bad player. He just wasn't kind of like, you're looking and thinking, there's just no way you mistake him for being a top level first division player. That's just ludicrous. But the Langley factor in this, Everton have taken the lead. They're 1-0 up, totally against the run of play. But then Liverpool obviously have to kind of like go in search of this equaliser with even more kind of forcefulness, a higher back line now. It's fullbacks really pushing on. Liverpool leaving themselves a little bit open at the back, and sure enough, it's Langley who springs the line. He's got the entirety of the Liverpool half to gallop into. He's got Mike Hooper ahead of him, who will surely kind of like move towards his right hand post this time. But no, he manages to stay central. He stays on his feet. And Langley doesn't even hit the target. He puts it wide of Hooper's left-hand post.
But it wasn't even just that. He was clean through with another Everton player, Paul Wilkinson.
Absolutely.
Who had come on for the aforementioned Neil Adams, who only lasted 25 minutes. I think of all their replacements that had come in for that, he was one who this was a step up a little too far, perhaps. But anyway, Wilkinson came on as well. He was racing through. So Langley had two options. One, smash it past Hooper with ease, or two, roll it to the side for Wilkinson to do the honours with that open net from the edge of the box, as it would have probably been, I guess. But still, they should have scored. You've got to score these. But equally, having said that, I can't believe Liverpool hadn't already equalised even prior to this as well. The number of opportunities that they just created in these few minutes. As you say, they had to push on. They were really going for it, which is entertaining in a game that ultimately doesn't count for much. So that was really good value. But yes, left all these open spaces. Everton really should have put it to bed here, and then it would have been the ultimate smash and grab victory. And I'm sure they'd have taken some solace in it, even if it didn't quite or wouldn't quite have made up for what happened in May in both the bigger competitions. But yeah, an impressive miss, let's just say, especially given who was in goal.
Absolutely. But yeah, Liverpool have been pushing on them. Within minutes of Dalglish's arrival, he'd hit the post. He created chances here, there, and everywhere. But McMahon had this opportunity. The ball had actually been laid into him in the penalty area by an unwise back pass, obviously aiming to get it back to Bobby Mims in an era where the goalkeeper can pick it up from a back pass. But Alan Harper had played him in, which was an intriguing. Alan Harper, ex-Liverpool player. Steve McMahon, ex-Everton player. At one point, Harper would have dreamed of laying on a goal for Liverpool at Wembley, but he must have absolutely, his heart, lungs, liver, absolutely everything must have been in his mouth for that split second until Bobby Mims come flying into Steve McMahon to kind of like deny him, the opportunity. There is another opportunity as well where, who is it that breaks through? Ooh, it's going to annoy me that now. One of the Liverpool players makes a breakthrough on Mims, but Mims kind of like comes out to meet him outside the penalty area, hits the ball against the on-rushing player, possibly Craig Johnston, only to see the ball go wide of the post. One of those classic ones where the goalkeeper hits the ball against the on-rushing striker, and it could go in the back of the net. It might fly into the stand. It might hit the woodwork. But yeah, this one just drifted wide. So Liverpool have been seriously knocking on the door when Heath actually kind of like opens the score. But the equaliser eventually comes, and it's a magnificently worked equaliser. There's a great back heel as part of this from Craig Johnston. There's a wonderful kind of layoff from Dalglish, rush to Dalglish, and then Dalglish's ball across the penalty area onto the on-rushing, Ian Rush.
See what you did there.
I see what I did there. To thunder the ball into the net with just 2 minutes remaining. It's a fine goal. It's a fine goal.
It's the kind of goal that you expect from a team of that quality. It was a very good quality goal. And Dalglish, I think he was central to the improvement in Liverpool. You talked about how they'd been the better team throughout most of the game, but they became significantly so when Dalglish was on. And this is Dalglish towards the latter days of his career, of course, player-manager at this point. And in similar way to, I think through the run-in of the league the previous season, he'd brought himself back into the lineup a bit more towards the end, and that seemed to help get Liverpool across the line. And likewise, you could just shrink that down into a smaller format for this game. It galvanized the team. I don't know, maybe just having your manager present suddenly focused a few minds, perhaps. But the improvement was instant when he came on, and he hit the post very quickly, as you mentioned. But they had 3 or 4 chances within the first 5 or 6 minutes of him being on the pitch. It changed things utterly. But yeah, this is a very nice goal. The lovely little neat flick back heel from Johnston. And then Rush and Dalglish, as they'd done many, many times before, and would continue to do so through this season. But of course, Ian Rush must have, I don't know where his head was at this time, because it had been a confusing few weeks for him, of course. So he had been signed. He was a Juventus player by this stage. He had officially left Liverpool over the summer, only to be loaned back. That was obviously the plan initially for this season anyway, I guess, because the restrictions on foreign players in Italy. He was the third, I guess, of only 2 allowed, and therefore was loaned back to Liverpool. But it still must have been a bit of a confusing situation for him, because it wasn't certain that he'd be able to play for Liverpool for this season until quite close before the season began. And yet he just picks up where he left off and carries on scoring, and scored a fair few throughout the rest of the season, even if it didn't take Liverpool to any further silverware beyond that Super Cup that you mentioned earlier, which I guess makes up for missing out on everything else. But yeah, an odd time for Ian Rush, and just an odd situation. And we all know how his time in Juventus would ultimately work out. So yeah, I guess it just makes it even a bit more odd that he spent a year as a Juventus player at Liverpool. It just seems very strange when you think about it. But there, that was the case.
It's very much as Bobby Ewing in the shower kind of moments where he was at the deathbed scene and then kind of like disappears for a year and comes back in the shower to Pamela Ewing, and the whole 1987-88 season has been just a dream. But it was a dream, but in a different way for Liverpool supporters. But yes, Gian Piero. Oh, what's his name? Gian Piero Bonaperti, of course. A Juventus legend on the pitch, and he went on to be president. He had tried so hard to move the goalposts at the FIGC. The Italian Football Federation, to expand the number of foreign players that Italian teams could field from 2 to 3. Now that advance would soon come. And these arguments would open that door eventually, but not for the 1986-87 season. Rush's confirmation of being a Liverpool player for 86-87 in loan terms was only rubber stamped 48 hours before this game. It tends to go for it did rumble on that it was going to be a likely scenario, but it was only confirmed on the Thursday before this game taking place on the Saturday. So not much more than 48 hours elapsed before this, since Rush had been confirmed for Liverpool. Juventus had wanted him as well as part of this. Projected conversations had taken place to try and put him out on loan to another Italian club, to acclimatise to the Italian game, similar to what they did with Michael Laudrup. Michael Laudrup spent 2 years on loan at Lazio before finally landing at Juventus as a player. And, the Juventus have wanted to do similar with Rush when they eventually admitted defeat on being able to get that third foreigner rule.
This was the 80s equivalent of stockpiling all the best youth players and shipping them out on loan, like Chelsea style. This is just buy everybody and loan a few of them out. This was the 80s equivalent. Buy a superstar, can't play him because you've got too many other superstars. Send him back to where he came from for a year, and try him the year after.
Absolutely. In terms of Liverpool and Everton, though, it's Everton that do have the last laugh in 1986-87. This Charity Shield, a big oversized 50p with an extra side or two is handed to Alan Hansen and Kevin Ratcliffe, who lift it together. There's the photos on the pitch of the two teams lining up together.
On that photo, Kevin Sheedy seems to be the only Everton player sort of stuck out on a limb. He seems to be surrounded by 6 or 7 Liverpool guys off to one side. I don't know what he did wrong. Maybe he thought we were like properly integrating, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red. He did his part, and then everyone else just stayed over the other side.
Absolutely. As another ex-Liverpool reserve, Sheedy must have kind of like thinking, no, I need to hang around with these double winners rather than my set of failures.
Hey, my Kevin Sheedy claim to fame is he walked when I was in sixth form. I worked in the local supermarket fruit and veg aisle, and he lived in my village. And he came along, and one of the other lads who worked there said, oh, "Someone famous in your aisle." And I just looked along, and Kevin Sheedy was strolling along, and I was just sort of grinning away at him. This was early 90s when he was at Newcastle. I was grinning away, and he just walked past and went, "All right." And there you go. That is my Kevin Sheedy story.
Excellent stuff, Paul. Paul McParlin will be very impressed with that. But yeah, we could do a Kevin Sheedy special. A magnificent player with one of the best left foots of his era. A truly excellent foot, but both wide on the left in central areas. Such a good player. And he would be a massive part of Everton's title-winning success across 86-87. Everton got the definitive last laugh on this one by reclaiming the league title from the possession of Liverpool. Later in that season, somewhat, and as Paul's great book, it is a fantastic, all tongue-in-cheek jibes earlier on. It is a fantastic book that goes into that season in such depth. That both he and Trevor Steven are massive parts of that. In a season in which Peter Reid does miss a lot of football, in which they are without Paul Bracewell all season, have the Langley experiment, sell off Kevin Richardson. So many bizarre elements to that season which make it such an unlikely scenario that they end up champions, yet they do. They do get their moments without a shadow of a doubt.
They do, but equally the fact the season began with Everton and Liverpool, and what I also, just to mention the Charity Shield again briefly, I love the fact not only did they lift the trophy together, but the clubs got to have it for 6 months each. I think that's a glorious little detail that's just so sweet. But the clubs, they played each other 5 more times this season, which is, I guess, shows the standing of them. Obviously, twice in the league, and then there was a League Cup as well. And then 2 in the Super Cup, as you mentioned earlier, a 2-legged final. This is last season's Super Cup, not even this season's Super Cup, wasn't it? This we definitely need to have an episode on this because I think this is a magnificent tournament. And I guess that's me volunteering. But the whole concept of it, of the clubs who missed out on Europe, having a competition to make up for missing out on Europe. And then they even invented another competition for everyone else who didn't miss out on Europe. But in case they felt slighted, they got to have a full Members' Cup as well. The whole shebang is just nuts and not very popular. But hey-ho, Liverpool won it in a 2-legged final. And Ian Rush scored how many? He got 5 more Merseyside derby goals this season to add to his tally. Sorry, 9 in total against Everton this season. Sorry, my mistake. So he obviously went extra big on them now that he was a Juventus player officially.
Absolutely. I mean, his goals in the Merseyside derby, the league game late in the season at Anfield, there's 2 that day, I think he scores, and they equal the Dixie Dean record of top scorer in Merseyside derbies.
I feel like I shouldn't be mentioning Newcastle too much, but again, Ian Rush was another one who pitched up there later in his career and played very briefly. But I do recall vividly during one FA Cup run in the late 90s that he, away at Everton, it was goalless, it was dull, not a lot happening. And who comes off the bench? Ian Rush. And we all knew what was going to happen next.
It was one of the most ugliest, beautiful goals I think I've ever seen in my life. I can remember.
But it must have been so depressingly predictable for anyone at Everton. But there you go.
Fantastic. Moving on to our and finally section in true. I don't know who we want to pick for this one. You can take your pick. Do you want Sandy Gall? Do you want Alistair Burnett? Trevor McDonald? Julius Somerville?
I think Trevor McDonald, he's the one I associate with the and finally. If you do it in his voice, that would be better.
Cultural terms, Aidan. Cultural terms. I sent you a link earlier on. Did you manage to have a look at it? It was to the official top 40, actually. If you scroll down that, I think it's like the top 100 and top 200. But yeah, it was the top 40 we were focusing on. The singles charts on the 10th of August, the week leading up to the Charity Shield. Take a look at it. What songs are you choosing? And I'll allow you to pick as many songs as you want as well.
I've got a few I can comment on. What I would say, first of all, is that I would not be illegally copying the number 1 song, Lady in Red by Krista Berg.
That is the right answer.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, what a horrific piece of music that is. Yeah, anyway.
Celebrity Liverpool supporter, Krista Berg.
Really? Oh, dear.
We are not blessed on that respect.
Well, I guess that's why it's not Lady in Blue. But there's some real dross in the top end of this chart, I think.
I see a pattern in this. Every time I've posed this question thus far, during the job interviews and all of that, I'm looking at thinking the songs I pick are all kind of like, they're roughly clustered between kind of like number 20 and number 36.
So, for example, we've got So Macho at number 3. I mean, dearie me. People's taste in 1986 is not what it should have been. The young lad in me, though, did quite enjoy, I do remember, Camouflage by Stan Ridgway. Probably because it was so weird. I guess that's why. Weird. But I did like that one. But you're right. Further down is where I find ones that I probably like more, like Bruce Hornsby. In tribute to Bruce Grobbelaar, maybe The Way It Is. That's at 28. I like that one. And also, oddly, and I don't know that I particularly like this song, but my favourite Waste of Time by Owen Paul, that reminds me massively of being away on a school residential that summer. But that will have been probably June, July. So I guess it was in the charts for some time. But anyway, that just completely vividly reminds me of that time. I liked Happy Hour by House Martins.
Yes.
I even didn't mind Let's Go All the Way by Sly Fox, which was higher up at number 12. What I can't bear, though, and this is my controversial opinion, and number 11 is Panic by the Smiths. I cannot stand the Smiths. I just cannot stand. I get all the guitar. I like all of that, you know. That I can hear all of that, but you put Morrissey's voice over anything, and I just cannot stand it. He's so bloody whiny and miserable. I can't take it. I can't hack it. I hate Morrissey with every fiber of my being. So any music that he's voicing, for all the wonderful guitar rhythm going on behind, I just can't take it.
You heard it first. It's the Smiths' Marmite. The Smiths' Marmite. But yes, honourable mentions for Happy Hour by the House Martins at number 36, which peaked at number 3 and spent 11 weeks in the charts. I think a bit of a sparse top 40, this one, really, as far as
there's some weird things going on.
Yeah, there's some odd stuff in there, you know, and not much stands out to me in that one. But yeah, I'd have to say, yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think I'd be listening to top 40 that week, having seen the print out for it. This an era in which the top 40 was kind of like released on a Tuesday, but only kind of like actually broadcast on the Sunday or something like that. It was a absolutely mad, a mad scenario. Moving to the cinema, Aidan, it's the box office for August 1986. What is it that you're going to watch in there out of the biggest grossing movies of August 1986?
Well, Top Gun is in this list, so that is undoubtedly the one that I would have been going to and remember the best. Aliens is top, but I imagine I was too young for that. But Top Gun, I remember vividly. Everybody at school was talking about Top Gun. Everybody had been to see Top Gun. This was the film, as far as I'm concerned, for that time. Karate Kid 2, I don't think I ever ended up seeing, and I probably didn't miss too much. Further down is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and that is a classic of the era, of course. But no, it's all about Top Gun.
Excellent. Honourable mentions there for... what should we go for? I don't know. I can't even remember what it was about, but there was number 18, Legal Eagles. That strikes me as something that was enjoyed by at least one of my siblings, and we were forced to watch it a few times. As you mentioned, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, number 15, grossing $10 million, $10.3 million, just over $10.3 million. The horrendous Howard the Duck at number 10. Flight of the Navigator at number 9. Was that the one where the kind of like the kid in the kind of like the alien spaceship and all that type of stuff?
That yes, apparently that is it.
That's what. Yeah, avoiding number 5, The Fly. All very freaky, totally freaky. I'm not going watching that. Karate Kid Part 2. I enjoyed Part 1. I'd have been drawn into that. Top Gun. I wasn't big on Top Gun at the time. I can appreciate it now, but yeah. And then I'm never going watching Friday the 13th
Part 6.
Part 6. Jason lives. Does he do anything but live, Jason, in those movies? And again, Aliens. That whole kind of like bursting out the stomach thing with the first one. It's kind of like, no, I'm not having that. So yeah. So for me, that's kind of like not having it.
But there's not that many big ones. I say that Top Gun is obviously one of the biggest movies of the entire decade, but you look down the list, there's not that many massive films. So Aliens, Top Gun, The Fly, I guess, has probably been more cult classic than huge because it was so grim. And then Stand By Me, I guess, further down is one that's become a bit of a classic in retrospect, probably even more than it was at the time. Likewise, Ferris Bueller. But I think maybe Top Gun and Aliens just overshadowed everything else this year, except for obviously Friday the 13th Part 6, which sits at number 2.
Ruthless People at number 7 rings a bell for me as well. Something to do with kind of like identity theft or something like that. It was Bette Midler or I can't think, but yeah, that rings a massive bell to me. Ruthless People at number 7 as well, but not many to drag me to the cinema there It has to be said, and not much in the top 40 to drag me to recording illegally from the radio either. So not a law breaking week that week as far as the top 40 is concerned for me. Moving on to our next topic, summer 1986. Aidan, give me a sporting event that made an impression on you, across the summer of '86, or broader '86. If you
no, I can do summer. I can do summer. I remember very well watching. This was an era where athletics was in its prime. I think we can safely say. We'd had all the Kerr, Ovett, and Steve Cram stuff going on. There was Zola Budd. There was Linford Christie coming through at this time. It was a successful period for British athletics, and just a time where the sport itself seemed to be at its peak, where we hadn't quite fully accepted the dodginess of everything that was going on with certain countries and so on. And I mentioned previously, like where I live and grew up, every year we had top class athletics on the doorstep at Gateshead Stadium. So it was a thing that you got quite into locally. Anyway, I do remember vividly the 1986 European Athletics Championships, which were in Stuttgart, West Germany, but seeing all sorts of East German success at various events, female in particular, some Soviet success also, but equally, like I say, a lot of British success. And it just seemed to be in a way that you wouldn't see an equivalent European Championship in athletics today. It was a huge thing with a big football stadium with the athletics track sold out to the brim with a crackling atmosphere and some exceptional stuff going on through various means. But no, I really recall that very much so. And I imagine that will have been through July or August of 1986.
Yes, I'm just looking at it there. What we had was that was the August, and but what we'd also had that year was the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Yes. Oh God, I can't believe I didn't mention this. I actually went to them. That's only just up the road. It's only a couple of hours drive, and yes, we went up and we saw some.
What did you go watching, Aidan?
It was just athletics again. Rather sparser crowds than we're talking about for the European Championships, but. I remember seeing Ben Johnson and Linford Christie racing. Because Ben Johnson won the gold then.
He did.
This was an event that was heavily boycotted though by lots of African nations.
It was massively boycotted. Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't quite what it might have been for some of the events. So there was no Kenyan participation, for instance, in many of the track events or Tanzania, Uganda, etc. All of those strong running nations that could have been taking part. So yeah, it was a bit diminished, but still, we did go. I can't believe I forgot that one. I remember being stood in the crowd there was this Aussie guy in front of us, and an Australian just won the gold. And I think it was, if my memory serves, it was the women's marathon. So this athlete, she just completed the marathon, done the final bits of the marathon around the track, just where we'd seen them start a little while before. And then we sort of enjoyed other events while they were out around the streets, and then they popped up back again for the finish. But anyway, she was doing a lap of honour, and there was an Aussie in front of me who had this, it was a duvet cover, it turns out, but it was an Australian flag, and he was waving this, and she was coming over and she tried to take it from him, and he hastily dragged it back in and hid it away and said, "No, you can't have that." And he sort of chuckled to everyone around and said, "I need to sleep in that tonight."
Absolutely outstanding. I mean, looking through the medal winners there, yes, Lisa Martin was the winner of the women's marathon. Yes,
well, I feel vindicated in my memory, even I forgot the entire event.
Shane, you entirely got that right. There were gold medals for Sally Gunnell in the 100 meters hurdles. You've got who else have we got here? Let's have a look.
Steve Cram won a couple of golds.
Yeah, Daley Thompson winning the decathlon. We have I can always remember Steve Ovett winning because he moved up to do the 5,000, and there was he won gold. Jack Buckner won silver, and Tim Hutchins won bronze. So they got a gold, silver, bronze in it, and I can remember them like waving to the crowds on the way through. But yeah, Steve Cram won the 1500 and the 800. Tom McKean, taking silver in the 800. Peter Elliott, one of the great backing dancers of British athletics.
You feel so sorry for him because he was clearly a world-class athlete of the very best caliber, and yet he was like third or fourth in this country.
Yeah, part of that era of British races. Roger Black won 400 metres gold, and Linford Christie finished second for silver in the 100 behind
Ben Johnson.
Mike McFarlane winning bronze. Ben Johnson also won bronze in the 200 metres. But yes, I think that was the Commonwealth Games where it all started to feel like you could win a medal from a packet of Kellogg Stars, or we could all win a Commonwealth medal in the summer of 1986. But yes, in Stuttgart at the Euros, Linford Christie won gold in the 100 metres, and Roger Black in the 400 metres, Sebastian Coe in the 800, Cram in the 1500, Jack Buckner in the 5,000. A lot of
hugely successful
there, massively successful, and yet even winning in the 4x400 metre relay there. Chris Akabusi involved, Derek Redmond, as well as Brian Whittle. That would have been something. Brian Little would have been able to win something at the Commonwealth Games, but
not the European. No,
absolutely not. That's Brian Little winning more than he imagined in the summer of 1986. From what as
more than he won as a football manager.
Absolutely. In terms of what we were watching on television that Saturday after the Charity Shield, the BBC, over on the BBC, your options would have been the Montreux Rock Festival, Eurythmics, Aha, Big Country, Joe Jackson, Depeche Mode, Wax and Roger Daltrey among the artists and bands, Dukes of Hazzard, an episode of Sorry, Tiny Tim, normally protected by his monster of a mother from such excitements, gets involved with a bearded lady and a performing seal. Last in the series, a repeat. We also have film, The Train Robbers from 1973, news and sport at 9 o'clock. And then, perplexingly, we have Stanley Baxter's Christmas Hamper, a repeat of the previous Christmas's Stanley Baxter Christmas special in mid-August, as you would fully expect. ITV, it all goes a bit downhill after the Charity Shield. John Silver's return to Treasure Island, and there's more with Jimmy Cricket. Obviously, We Love TV, some kind of game show. Summertime special. Impressionist Les Dennis introduces Jim Davidson, Iris Williams, and the Nolans. Best avoided at all opportunities.
However, I do feel unbound to point out that Iris Williams is my daughter's name, and it was only recently we discovered that there was a singer of the same name. So I do feel an affinity to her.
There you go. See, you knew that this was the day. This was the one. Intriguingly, on BBC Two, there is a program called Tidy Up Walsall. It's nothing to do with it's nothing
their
to do
backline.
With,
no?
Yeah, it is nothing to do with Walsall FC. It is nothing to do with litter picking in Walsall. It was all to do with the cartoonist Bill Tidy, walking around Walsall, taking a light-hearted look at the town, according to the synopsis in the Daily Mirror.
And Walsall isn't the kind of place I'd feel it lends itself to that kind of show, and I've never been. I might be utterly decrying it, but it just doesn't strike me as.
It would be interesting to see if our friend Gary Thacker is on that episode, because he'd been knocking around Walsall quite extensively during the summer of 1986. Channel 4 quite obviously showing a load of old kind of like God knows what. The Brookside Omnibus at 6 o'clock, right to reply. The Stamp of Greatness, the story of John Paul Jones. The Newhart, Bob Newhart program, a kind of comedy drama called The Organisation, but at least they were showing Hill Street Blues at 10 o'clock. Aidan, anything in particular that's taking your fancy there?
I don't know about taking my fancy. There's a lot of rubbish, but I do feel like episodes of Sorry are following me around, because I'm sure that's exactly what we talked about in the summer of 1984 as well.
We have mentioned that before. We have.
So
Elsewhere.
yeah, I remember watching episodes of Sorry as well, and I don't think I enjoyed it.
No, not at all. It was never as funny as the Ronnie Barker sitcoms that were knocking around. And lastly, we shall have a little peruse at the back page headlines leading up to the Charity Shield. There is a lot of Dave Watson chat. Extensively, there is the chase for the signature of Richard Gough, wanting away from Dundee United. He's just been part of their team that's lost the UEFA Cup final and the Scottish Cup final. Tottenham in pole position, but Rangers eager. Jim McLean unwilling to sell to Graham Souness. There's also interest from Everton, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal as well. So there's a lot of Richard Gough chat there, with Tottenham eventually winning the race. Tottenham in the news a lot this week. David Pleat's not long taken over as manager. He's shifted from Luton Town, and he's gone right back to Kenilworth Road to snatch away Mitchell Thomas. The two clubs, Tottenham unwilling to meet the £500,000 asking price of Luton Town. They allow it to Mitchell Thomas is out of contract, which doesn't mean a free at that point in time. Jean-Marc Bosman isn't a thing at this point in time. If a player is out of contract, it simply means that the transfer fee goes to tribunal. And Tottenham are only offering £175,000 for a player that's knocking on the door of the England squad and would actually break into the England squad this season. The tribunal suggested £250,000. Luton massively incensed over that, feeling pickpocketed by the former manager. So it does create a lot of rancour. A week earlier, there'd been riots on across Channel Ferry between West Ham supporters and Manchester United supporters, travelling to and from respective pre-season friendlies. The summer of 1986 had seen English clubs travelling back into Europe for pre-season friendlies. They'd avoided doing that in the summer of 1985 quite rightly, but they ventured back out for European tours during the summer of 86. And it was Ted Croker of the FA had asked Tottenham to pull out of a four-team tournament in Barcelona, to which Tottenham told him to sling his hook. But happily, that went off peacefully. That Tottenham's Tottenham very much in the news. Mick Shannon making a lot of ripples. He's released a book which is quite explosive. There's a bit of slagging off of Don Howe in there over his style of football. There is also accusations in it from him, or intimations from him, about former teammates ticket touting, buying tickets for the 1976 FA Cup final and selling them off at a profit, dropping former teammates into hot water. Roma are perplexingly linked with, or peculiarly linked with, Mick Harford, a £1 million bid for Mick Harford. That one took me by surprise. Totally missed that one.
Oh, I wish he'd gone. That would have been magnificent.
That would have been absolutely amazing, wouldn't it? In the northeast, Middlesbrough on the brink of non-existence, saved at the 11th hour. The last minute of the 11th hour, basically. But they came so close to going to the wall. And at Sunderland, Tom Cowie steps aside as chairman, replaced by Bob Murray. Laurie McMenemy is given more money in which to create this amazing capitulation that will lead to them. It will take them out of the second division, but not the right way. It will result in them falling.
Not for the first time either. Not for the last time. I mean,
absolutely. Northeast matters for Middlesbrough and Sunderland that week, Aidan.
Yeah, it's about the right way for things to be. I think it's the natural order of things.
Other bits of business. Sheffield Wednesday signed David Hurst from Barnsley for £250,000. So your £250,000 could buy you a prospective England left back in Mitchell Thomas. The FA's tribunal for Mitchell Thomas, by the way, was based on the reasoning behind giving such a low valuation was that Luton hadn't paid a penny for him because he'd come through the youth system. That was what Luton were penalised over. A highly contentious bit of reasoning by the FA on that one. Charlton agreed to pay Sunderland £20,000 for the earlier mentioned Bob Boulder. So Bob Boulder is kind of like, off to Charlton, cursing the fact that he'd not been able to play a Liverpool first team game. And,
and glad he didn't have to play any more Sunderland first team games.
Certainly looks it. Mal Donachie turns down a move to Chelsea, signing a 3-year contract at Luton Town. Peter Beagrie signs for Sheffield United. Ali Robertson is ruthlessly released by Ron Saunders at West Bromwich Albion, just a year away from his testimonial. Paul Canoville, the iconic Paul Canoville, signs for Brentford, and the Football League agrees to 2 substitutes being allowed in the League Cup, but not league matches. The FA have already announced that they will allow two substitutes for FA Cup games. And Alex Ferguson is sniffing around a certain Stuart McCall, who will eventually tip up at Everton 2 years later, but he backs out of the deal. One of those sliding doors. Stuart McCall could have been an Aberdeen player under Alex Ferguson, but even then, only for a few months, because he himself will soon be off to Manchester United. Aidan, thank you so much for running through all things 1986 Charity Shield and literally everything that surrounded that week in life in general, and on the back pages of the or what was important to us as teenagers at that point in time.
Fabulous stuff. Who would have thought we'd get so much chat out of a meaningless game that doesn't count for anything? But one final thought on it, though, Stephen. We have mentioned the Super Cup already tonight. Whether the Charity Shield would have more credo, and I guess this applies now as back then, if it was termed the way the Europeans would term it, which is the Super Cup. Would we feel the same about it as a bit of a non-entity, a bit of a friendly, if it was called the Super Cup?
Absolutely. Bob Paisley always used to say it wasn't the winning of it, it was being involved in it, because if you were involved in it, then you'd clearly done something of significance. But I'm sure even then he never lost a Charity Shield, did Bob Paisley. So he must have held some kind of value in winning. Howard Kendall walks away from this game kind of like post-match interview with Jim Rosenthal, shrugs his shoulders a little bit at the late equaliser and just brands it. It's just a pre-season tournament, pre-season friendly anyway, isn't it? So he's very much of the mind that it's kind of like it's not the end of the world to kind of like see that equaliser going.
So what you're saying is Bob Paisley and Jose Mourinho are of a similar mind?
No, I would never say such a thing. That is absolute slander on the great Bob Paisley. Absolute slander.
Only on this one issue, then.
Total slander. Thank you so much, Aidan. We have managed to make a podcast about the 1986 Charity Shield last longer than the
game.
than the game itself lasted. I think we should be rightly proud of ourselves.
Very much so. And I guess we can share the glory of that and have 6 months of it each.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we shall do. We'll pose for the photos together and then go our separate ways. And given that you I think you scored the first goal there with mention of Maxwell, I'll have it for the next 6 months. This has been Module 1. I hope you've all learned something valuable to take forward with you. There will be Module 2 very, very soon of our new 1980s podcast entity, which brought partially by our sponsors, These Football Times. We'll have to throw in there as well. And please do join us again for our next module on Your Boys Took One Hell of a Beating, managing to say it without a terribly attempted Norwegian accent. Thank you and goodbye.